Us. Can raw power and strength and size beat skill? This is a tough question because it really depends. It's going to depend on several things. It's going to depend on the mindset of both parties a lot of times. It's also going to boil down to how injured the skilled person gets in the process from the person that's so powerful and strong and big. When we look at size and power, I think a good place to go way back to would be when we first saw guys like Tank Abbott come into the UFC years ago. We saw just raw power from a man that was over 6 foot tall and extremely powerful, still fairly young at the time. And the one thing that went against him, for instance, I'm just using Tank Abbott as an example, but the one thing that went against him was he had very limited cardio. And so a lot of people that ended up beating him really beat him because they just had more stamina. But I hear it said, especially in jiu-jitsu, many times I've heard it, oh, size, strength doesn't matter. And that is total malarkey. Whoever said that is just purely wrong. I'm not going to call them an idiot, but they're purely wrong. A lot of people will use a lot of the early fighters that we saw, and I'm just kind of going off the UFC right now because that's kind of what we have to monitor off of. But a lot of people say, yeah, but a lot of the younger jiu-jitsu or the smaller jiu-jitsu guys won the early UFCs, and they did, they did it in spectacular fashion a lot of times. At the same time, it was a brand new thing. To get on the ground and fight was just a brand new thing. It was something no one had ever really seen. It was something that was almost boring because the crowd would even boo, and they didn't know what was going on. It's like, why is this guy laying on this guy? And, and so it was an uneducated thing at the time. So people that would get on the ground had no clue what an armbar was, or a Kimura was, or an Americana was, or all these neon belly and different things that a lot of the original jiu-jitsu practitioners did know. At the same time, I think history really has shown as a whole that a powerful person can injure you. A big, strong, powerful person can injure you so fast with one connection because of the raw, sheer power behind what they're throwing. We saw guys like Ron Waterman. I mean, people that are kind of forgotten in this day and time a little bit. But we even when I first started jiu-jitsu, being well over 200 pounds, I was just the guys that have been doing it for a long time. Some of them I was mauling them, and I had no clue what I was even doing. But I would just get on them and maul them just from the sheer weight and power that I had, especially in my my mid 20s when I first started jiu-jitsu. And so, yes, when you're dealing with people, I've heard it said many times, oh, he's a big fat guy. You got to remember, even though he's a big fat guy, fat is weight. Okay? When you look at a man that's, let's say, 300 pounds and he's got a huge belly, well, a lot of times we tend to underestimate that weight and say, oh, he's slow, he can't move. The problem is, if he does get his hands on you, and especially if you have very limited skills, chances of him mauling you are going to be really serious. So you want to make sure that you're training with people. A lot of times people will train, for instance, a guy that's 150 pounds will train only with guys in his weight class or below his weight class, or maybe just a little bit up. Like I want to train with the 140 guys, but I don't want to go over that. A lot of times it's really good to train with people much larger than you, because if it ever happens that you get attacked by somebody much, much larger than you, you're going to have some serious issues if you're not used to that, and chances of you gassing very quick dealing with someone like that is probably going to happen. So yes, sheer power and strength are real. And if you've ever dealt with people that are, I used to have a guy that came to my academy, and he was 400, I believe he was 420 pounds. And man, I would let him lock me in, and I'd get in he'd get in side control and lock me down. And sometimes it would take me a minute to get away from him, just because of the sheer raw power. And he was in shape too. He wasn't just 420 pounds of fat. Guy was actually in pretty good shape. And so just dealing with someone with that magnitude of weight on top of you, even as a big guy, you got to remember too, when you are on your back, it's kind of the equivalent of being in water. If let's say like myself, I'm about 240 pounds. When I'm on my back, I don't weigh 240 pounds anymore. Now I may have the raw power still of pushing up or pulling in or whatever. At the same time, being on my back, I don't have the mass pushing down. So it's going to be a lot different. So you need to learn how to fight off your back. You really need to learn escapes, especially if you're a smaller person. You really need to learn how to escape I've seen black belts, really good black belts, that have been pinned for a long time. Sometimes even submitted simply from sheer weight and power that people have put on them that didn't have near the skill they've had. So again, yes, weight and power and strength are very real. And I guess really another guy who was not a fighter. I met him several times. Bob Sapp, 200 or 360 pound man, solid muscle. Guy's got chiseled abs. He's got traps up to here. I've got a picture next to Bob, and I'm a pretty big fella, but in the picture that I have with Bob Sapp, he is an enormous man. I'm actually looking up at him, his back compared to my back is about this much wider. The guy's just enormous. When he came into Pride Fighting years ago, he was mauling people. He was mauling veteran fighters that had fought for years. He was just mauling these guys. Now, he got taken out by a few great guys, but even Ernesto Hoost said, man, that man can hit. And Bob was just basically swinging. He had no skills. Maurice Smith, another good friend of mine, was training Bob at the time, and Bob got fairly decent before he retired, but just the sheer power and weight of the man was enormous. It was crazy how he was just slinging people and throwing people and running through guys, veteran fighters, just because of his sheer power and his mentality. You hit the guy and he just kind of look at you. It's like, wow, that is crazy. So a lot of times martial artists get this false idea of my technique is so superior. I'm going to chop him in the neck and poke him in the eye or whatever the case may be. And that may work. But at the same time, you need to know when you're dealing with raw power and a mindset that says, I'm fixing to tear you apart. Chances are you're going to be in for a rude awakening if you've never dealt with these types of individuals. I have, and I tell you what, I've had my hands full several times with large men that are trying to rip my arm off or rip my head off. So again, yes, my answer to that question, does power and strength matter? Absolutely. Absolutely. So train for that. Make sure you're training for that.